Hi, I'm Sunny from Sonlight Curriculum, and I'm excited to tell you about the segment you're going to hear next. Sarita Holtzman, the president of Sonlight, founded this company more than 30 years ago as the original literature-based homeschool curriculum. Many families who start homeschooling with Sonlight do so because they love to read, myself included. And if you're anything like I am, you love to get new TBR or to-be-read book recommendations from people you trust. So who better to get suggestions from than Sarita herself? She reads hundreds of books a year and reviews them for inclusion in Sonlight's programs. And in this episode, she's going to tell you about two books, one that is already part of a Sonlight program and one that's not. You'll get to hear what the books are about, why she thinks they're important, who she recommends them for, and more. So please join us. Hello, Sarita, and thank you for joining me today. We've spoken about some heavy, intense books in some of our other episodes, but today we're going to lighten things up a little bit and talk about some fun reads. So let's start by talking about Average by Andrew Clements. It's currently a read aloud in Sonlight's Level C, and many people have observed that Sonlight includes multiple Clements books in our program. So before we discuss About Average, can you tell us why you like him as an author?
Oh, I'd be glad to. I really like how I don't know if he's a believer or not. The problems his kids come up with and how they deal with their solutions are actually really godly and acting in the right way, right? So, for example, in About Average, which is the story we'll talk about today, there's a conflict, and the main character can decide to either strike back or act ugly toward her, but she chooses to use kindness, right? So it's an example of how we can actually live life more effectively. And his characters are really realistic and deal with things that I think our kids will come up with. I just feel like he's really got a good bead on how kids react to the world. And I like how his characters walk out their lives as they go through life. So it's really a good thing. And going back to your earlier comment of going with lighter stories, this came from my husband. He said, "Oh, wow, these have been really, really heavy books." And as I think about it, it's because those are the ones that are meaningful, right? Those are the ones that impact you and helps you think about things in new and fresh ways, right? So it was kind of like, okay, let's lighten it up and give people something to read over the Christmas break.
Right. Yeah. Anytime you need a fun story. And yeah, later on, we'll talk a little bit about too, like instilling that love of reading. It can't all be heavy, right? When you're teaching kids to read. So yeah, so I'm excited to hear about these and books that are aimed maybe for younger kids too, since we've talked about some for older kids. But let's talk about Average. I've read this one twice now because I have two kids who have both gone through Level C. But can you tell our audience what the premise of this particular book is?
I'd be glad to. It's a story of Jordan, who is a student I think she's in middle school, but she's just kind of an average person, right? She works hard at her schoolwork. She doesn't sing very well, and she doesn't play the violin very well. She works hard at all of the things that she does, and everybody likes her, but she's just kind of an ordinary, kind of a plain person. And I think, boy, a lot of times we can get into that mindset about ourselves too. We don't necessarily think, "Oh, I'm amazing at this," or "I'm wonderful at this." And it's just a story of somebody who's a helper, and she's no trouble. She's hardworking. She's just really a great person. But her heartburn is that she's probably never going to be on stage and have people applaud for her, right? She's never going to be the person who's the star of the play or the main singer in the choir or the lead violinist and all the things that are normally really, really honored and elevated. She just looks at herself and goes, "I'm just average at all of these." So she's one of those characters that I just love, because she's still hardworking. She still does things that are the right things, right? She's just really a great character, even though she's not an expert or exemplary in anything. She dreams of that, and it's one of those you kind of go, well, we probably all dream of someday standing up and having the applause go on, and just to recognize that it's okay to be average, right? So it's one of those where I love that about her.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good message for that age group. And we have received some questions about that, though, that the book is set in a school, which of course we homeschool if we're using Sonlight. And the protagonist is in that like 6th grade, middle school age range, even though Level C, we usually recommend for 3rd through 5th graders. So what do you say to that? Like when people question that, and how are the themes or lessons still applicable, even if we're reading it to younger students?
I just feel like we can always be looking to people who are older than us particularly if they're modeling things really, really well. And I do think Jordan does. I think she's someone, again, who she, for example, she's playing she's playing with the violin in the little orchestra that they have at their school. And she's the one that stays afterward to help pick up all the stands and put away the chairs. And I'm thinking, what middle schooler even wants to do that, right? So, she's just a good role model in doing things that she does. She does them excellently, right? So there's another part where she works with the soccer coach, who's, one of those people who doesn't actually come with a plan. She's just really athletic and has always had a lot of natural ability. And as someone who doesn't have a lot of natural ability, Jordan can see that you need to take these steps to get even better. So she comes up with, let's do this practice and let's do this route and let's run this way. So she's basically the brains behind making this soccer coach look amazing. So basically, Jordan helps this soccer coach come up with strategies to help students that are average improve themselves. Oftentimes, when people have a lot of natural ability, they don't even know how to begin to teach it. But as someone who's average and knows the steps she has to take to get better, she's able to help all of the soccer team improve. And that's the strategy and the good that we want to have for all of our students, right? So the story is, of course, readable by every child, and because the writing level is at an appropriate level. But for our children that are a little younger, to find a story that has a protagonist that we can admire and enjoy, I just love that. I just think there's so many things that Jordan does super, super well. Helpful, supportive. And when she gets into the conflict situation with one of her classmates, who basically finds a list of things that Jordan has put into the recycling bin. So she's even a model student in that appearance. She's even taking care of her stuff in a good manner. And then this girl starts reading these lists out loud, where she's actually trying to evaluate who she is and what she does well. And she comes up kind of short because she's going, I'm just not ordinary. I'm just not exciting about anything, right? And she has the opportunity to decide whether or not she should, again, retaliate, come against this girl, be mean-spirited back, but she chooses instead to come across as kind. And the transformation that occurs is one of those stories where I think this is a good message for all of us. How do we react when people come against us and act against us in mean ways? And to say, I choose to be kind. If every child learned that from a young age, I'd be super grateful.
Yeah, and that's such a great point too, that kids will encounter mean kids everywhere, even if they're not in middle school yet. That starts at a very early age.
Yeah, it sure does.
So
playpen.
Exactly. Yeah. So to learn those lessons and learn how to handle them, is always a good thing. So plus there's an exciting climax. I don't want to give it away for people who haven't read the book yet. But there is an exciting climax at the end of the story too. So I know sometimes people start out and they're like, well, should I keep reading? Yes, you absolutely want to keep going with this one.
Yes.
Now, the next book we're going to discuss is City Spies by James Ponti. And this one is also available on our website, even though it's not part of a regular academic program. Was that one that was included in one of our older summer reader packages?
It must have been. It must have been. It's just a really fun story. It's 4 kids that are 5 kids. It's actually 5 that are are adopted, or taken into a program to become spies. And it's because they're selected because they all have kind of extraordinary abilities. And they're all orphans. So they're all coming kind of from the same hard position. So the book opens with one of the students in the foster system in just a terrible home. And she's actually a computer expert who goes in and tries to expose her terrible foster parents so that all of them can be rescued from the situation. And as a result, she ends up in court expecting to go before a judge who's probably going to put her into some kind of a camp to keep her away from computers and just try anyway. But it's one of those where it opens with the despair, that my gifts will be wasted. And then she's collected by this agency that pulls together these teams of kids who bring all of their giftings and then bring about good results. And of course, it's a kind of a story I just love, right? Where we use the gifts and the skills and the abilities that we have, and we make a difference in our world. And that's what each of these kids do. They not also, let me remind what they do. One of them's got great math skills. So she's able to look at patterns and see how things operate based on how the mathematics all comes together. One of them's a computer hacker. One of them's really good at survival skills. One of them is resourceful and creative, they say. And one of them does street magic, where so they're able to step into situations and use misdirection and just change things. So it's a fun story. And they basically save the world as a group. And again, it's just for fun and for enjoyment, but it's smart, and kids who look at a situation and figure out how to fix things on the fly. And I just feel like those are actually really good messages for our kids as well. Kids that are actually making a difference and thinking creatively and using their gifts, and all my favorite kinds of themes that I look for in a book. So.
Well, and I love what you say too about how they're using those gifts for good, right? Computer hacking or street magic could go the wrong way, right? If you're not using them correctly, but the fact that they use them for good in this story, and it's part of a series. So if readers love this one, then they can find out what happens next. And I haven't read these yet, but they look really fun. What age range would you say that they're best suited for if you want to turn it over to your child to read?
They're probably from middle school on up. So there's nothing in them that's controversial, but because it's, there's bad guys that they come against, that could be a little scary for younger kids. There's nothing untoward that happens. But I like the fact, too, that they learn to work as a team. Each one of them, because they're so different and they're coming from relatively broken backgrounds, they have to learn how to appreciate one another and recognize that they need one another, and which are just really, really good lessons for every kid to learn, right? I think there's just the right amount of tension, just the right amount of suspense, and I just think they're a really, really an enjoyable story. And they end up solving a big mystery, right? Where they all put their heads together, and this one brings this piece, and this one collects this one, and I just think it's just great. So they save the world, and that's exactly what we want our kids to do.
Exactly, yeah, and learn to work together and all of those things. And I know we kind of lightly touched on it at the beginning, but at Sonlight, we of course talk about how good books help kids become avid readers, and we don't just stick to the classics all the time or those hard, intense books. So how do exciting books like the ones that we've talked about today really play into that, or help kids fall in love with reading in a way that they might not otherwise?
I think if you're looking at different genres, that's a good thing, a good way to find out even what your kids' interests might be. So we try to do a wide variety of stories and styles, and so that your kids can find, what it is. Oh, this really rings. I really love a mystery, or I really love space novels, or whatever it might be. So we're actually helping them both introduce them to a wide variety, and we're also helping them to find things. Oh, I really do like this style of books. That is what we do, and I just think. Anytime you can come up with a book and you say, oh, I love to read, and that this made me so happy, and I stayed up all night to read this one, I think we've really, really, really dialed in and gotten it where we want to go. And you mentioned that this is part of a series, and I've read all three, and all three of them are fine. We can make that real strong recommendation at this point. Of course, when they get beyond, I can't speak for that yet because I haven't read those yet. So just be aware.
Well, and that's a good point too, because I know we sometimes run into that where a series starts out really strong, and then later on, I don't know if it's a ghost author or they just change what they're planning to write about. But the fact that it is part of a series, I think this is something we do a lot with Sonlight, is we'll start with the first book in a series. And why do we do that? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Oh, I'd be glad to. Because we're always looking for more books to hand our kids to read. If you can find an author that you think your kids really enjoy, go out and read basically all of them, right? So it's a way to broaden what your kids are even have it available. Just finding good books to read sometimes can be really challenging. So I'm always glad if we can get a series going and help kids step into one. I think what I like about this one too is it's girls and boys in this team, right? So it's it's readable and enjoyable by both sexes, because there's 3 girls and there's 2 boys on the team, and they all have a very active part in the book. So that makes it fun.
Yeah, I love that too, because I know it does kind of depend. I have a daughter and a son, and so sometimes one favorite for one is not a favorite for another. And so I like that, where you've got a mix of characters that all kids can lean into and enjoy those stories a little bit more. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close out today?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, perfect. When you were talking about the series and always looking for good kid or good books for kids to read. That is something too that we get a lot of. My kids, I can't keep them in good books. So like I love your advice there to look at authors they enjoy and go check out other books that are written by the same author, because they're probably in the same style, and that can be fun for your kids too. And Sarita, as always, thank you for being here. I'm excited to check out City Spies with my kids and see how they enjoy it. It sounds like one that I think they both would really enjoy. So we'll have to check that one out.
Perfect. Thanks, Sunny. Appreciate it. Have a good
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.